Woohoo! We got a good one today.
I feel like we say that every time because I think, well, basically we do. We're constantly exposing ourselves all the time. So here we go.
Right? Stripped down, raw, real, like letting it all hang out. So this is Tanya, and I'm here with my lovely Erin. And we're going to be talking about a couple of concepts today. The concept of stress, the concept of the stress response, which is to fight, to flee, and to freeze, and to fawn. We're also going to be talking about levels of vibration. What the hell is vibration? So we're going to explain that when we talk about raising your vibration. What the fuck do we mean? What are we talking about here? So we're going to explain all of that in today's podcast. But first, we have to bring it together. So I want to just invite all of you to just have some awareness around what sensations are going on for you. Where are you at right now? Look around. Notice physically where you're at. Are you present? Are you present with your surroundings? Are you aware of what's to your left? Are you aware of what's to your right? Are you aware of what's behind you and in front of you? Are you aware of your breath? How are you breathing? Beyond your nose or your mouth, how far is that air going? Can you feel it? When you take a breath in, can you feel it in your lungs? Can you feel it in your chest? Can you feel it going down the back of your nasal passages? Are you stuffed up? Are you breathing through your mouth? Just awareness. Awareness of the power of your breath. Without it, we would be dead. Without our hearts beating, also dead. Good thing we're not responsible for making sure that our hearts are beating and that we're breathing, because sometimes we would fail, and that means we'd be bye-bye. Time to go back to the energy of all that is. So having some awareness around what's going on inside, what sensations you're experiencing, as well as what's going on the outside. Because what Erin and I know without question is that whatever's going on the inside is absolutely mirrored on the outside. It's mirrored in how our skin looks, what's going on with our body. It's mirrored in the surroundings, the relationships, the energy of the relationships that we are in. All of that energy and how it's moving inside of us is showing up outside of us. So on that note,
Let's rock and roll.
Yeah, baby. So today we're going to be talking, Erin's in the proverbial hot seat. Whoa.
I feel like I'm in there a lot. I actually like it. I think that you are a much better question asker and I am a much better responder. But I like playing tennis back and forth too. So
Isn't that funny? Because we have talked about the fact that when speaking in the language of feelings, you're like, I feel responsible for other people's feelings. Like I have to really manage how other people are feeling about something. And so
old Erin used to.
Yeah, kind of this idea of like preventing people from feeling a certain way.
Yeah.
And then all the while, you're still feeling that.
Yep.
So like the old version of Erin, similar to the in transition version of like my husband, is the wanting to or feeling the need to manage everybody else's emotions, how they're going to feel at the expense of your own. And then I have seen myself as the fixer. I'm the one coming in and like cleaning up the poop, cleaning up the pee, cleaning up the spilled tears and the snotty noses and the mess that gets left behind when everything gets broken. Like, I'm
Yeah.
coming in to clean up the spilled milk and try and heal the glass, put the pieces back together. And we're starting to kind of we play with these roles, actually, you and I, quite a bit. So today, what we're going to play with is talking about Erin's experience emotionally, and how how stress can be really elusive because we adapt to it in a number of ways. And we think that we're fine, and we're not, right? I was thinking about this just before we got on with the podcast. Some of us grew up in households where there was lots of yelling and screaming and fighting. And then we may have adapted to really trying to hold our anger in, or really trying to
Be the peacemaker.
Be the peacemaker. So we've adapted to being the peacemaker,
Mm-hmm.
and we're just so used to being in these chaotic environments where we are making peace all the time.
Yeah.
But oftentimes that peace is not actually happening within us. It's just happening, we're trying to facilitate it outside of us. Others of us may have grown up in an environment where there was no yelling, but clearly there were emotions that were being repressed, things unsaid, the silence, the uncomfortable silence of being. And so some of us may adapt to that by withdrawing even further, like not displaying or showing our emotions, not even being in touch with our emotions because they're just too intense. Like, you weren't taught how to experience them. Others may actually, go into a more reactive state where they're easy, what do they call that? A hair trigger,
Mm-hmm.
where they're easily explosive. And
Yeah.
the same for the explosive family dynamic. We may continue with that explosive dynamic, or we might pull in. So
And
Erin,
everything in between, right? Because I grew up with fighting, and then also a retraction of not talking, right? So,
mhm,
and what prompted this podcast was, we had a client that I had mentioned, they're in survival, and they were very resistant to that idea. And I think
mhm,
that it's kind of I always talk about it, when you go into the doctor and they're like, okay, tell me your stress level. And you're like, oh, it's a 3 out of 10, right? Because
mhm,
you're just in it all the time. You don't really think that you're that stressed. And then if you have worked through it, or for in my exact case, right, when I had gone to the cardiologist. I don't ever know if I ever told you, Tanya, but I had gone to the cardiologist after Jason's whole BMW thing, because I was having heart palpitations. And she was like, oh, how stressed are you? I'm like, well, not, 3, 4. And then after now, who I am now, and I'm like, oh, I was a 50 out of 10.
yeah, yeah. So Erin, take us back to what it was like to be, I know one of your most prominent ages that you talk about is 10. What was
Yeah.
10-year-old Erin, 10-year-old Erin's family like? What was the dynamic between your mom, your dad, and your siblings?
It was just arguing and fighting all the time. And I'm sure, as I come out of this stress response, my memories, start to come back. But I think it was just a lot of arguing, raising your voice, maybe probably yelling, lots of silence. One of the words we would always be is mom going to give us the silent treatment, right? How long, or
Mhm,
you're going to have to walk on eggshells. How long is this going to last for? So we had lots of different dynamics in the house. We had raising our voice, we had arguing, we had withdrawing, not talking. And so I never really knew what was the day gonna, what was the day gonna bring, right? Because you never
mhm,
knew. There was no steady, calm baseline. It was, now looking back, very volatile, right? But I had always
mhm,
kind of minimized it and said it was, fine, or that's what other families. But for sure, it was lots of things were triggers for both of my parents. And it was just in a constant state of survival and stress.
Yeah. Even as I sit here with you, I'm noticing like in the past when you've talked about this, you did share the cardiologist piece with me before. And in the past, when you've talked about the volatility with your dad and getting angry, or your mom and shutting down and withdrawing, I feel that in my body. And just you expressing that right now, I'm noticing like just very faint actually vestiges of that emotion that still comes up within you, right?
Hmm.
But definitely a difference from the intensity when you,
Hmm.
like when we first met and you started sharing about some of the dynamics in your household, it started actually becoming aware of the dynamics in the household. um, I could feel much more intensity, and you were still a little in the numb phase
Hmm.
about that. Now recently your parents visited and you spent quite a bit of time with them while they
Hmm.
were on island. And what what did you notice difference wise in your level of awareness around them?
I think it's like I had just said earlier, right? It's like you're away from it and then you come back in and you're like, whoa, this is intense, right? But when you're with it a lot, you adapt, right? You don't think it's as much. I mean, I knew it was like once I had Grayson, because I had Grayson to kind of be my barometer. She was like, Mom, tell them to stop arguing all the time, tell them to start raising their voice, tell them to stop, like, why are they doing this? And so I had her to kind of like, oh, this is a lot for her. And so being removed from that physical environment, even though that they lived next close to us, we didn't hang out with them much, but 40 years, right, of
Hmm.
having a relationship with them. So then them coming to island and then spending an intensive 7 days together, it was like, whoa, like after day two, I was just like, what in the world, we're going to need to have a conversation, because I'm not doing the next 7 like this. So
Yeah,
it was kind of like getting out of that, like, oh, okay, now I see it was a 10 out of 10 all along, right? And being inserted back in and being like, no, we're not doing this.
right. So that really um, highlights why it is and how it's not uncommon that the clients that we work with together, it's like um, we can see the stress that they oftentimes cannot. They're just like, I'm butting up against this issue, or I'm butting up against that issue. I am like, they'll say things like, there's got to be more than this.
Yeah.
Like me, I was like, I have this great life. I'm happily married. I have a nice house. I love my job. I don't make a lot of money, but I love my job. 30 years of doing nails um, allowed me to bring out that creative spirit and everything. But I just kept feeling like there's got to be something more than this. I feel like there's something else I'm supposed to do. What were you noticing?
Also, too, we have clients that are like, I feel anxiety all the time, right?
Yeah.
And then we also
Mm-hmm.
have clients that cry all the time, right?
Yep.
Don't get me wrong, crying, like that's something I had to work through. But when we're crying all the time, it's almost, the way I look at that is like, it's your, what is it? Like your tea kettle, right? Like you're just like, it's just ready to pop, right? Like
Yeah.
you can't. So go ahead.
I was just going to say, I had um, when I very first started my journey of like using EFT, using tapping, using the energy meridians in my body, um, I was, I felt like I was crying all the time. I was either depressed or I was anxious, sometimes both at the same time, which was really fucked up. Um, and when I started going to her, she said, "You're like a barrel that's already full. And everything that's coming out is just the overflow of all of this stuff that's been held
It's the capacity,
inside."
right? There's no more
Yeah.
capacity to allow.
Yeah.
So, I mean, for me, it was like I had checked all of the boxes, right? Like I had, for most of, the Western culture, like I'd done all the things that everyone says, like, these are the things that are going to make you happy. And I was miserable, and I was like, what's wrong with me? Like, I have an amazing husband, I had friends that
Mm-hmm.
complained about their husbands. I'm like, he's amazing. And I also hate him sometimes, right? And my child is so healthy and so, wonderful. And sometimes I want to just like choke her, or,
Mm-hmm.
and I make really good money and we have, you know, plenty of money in the bank, and it's still not enough. And, looking forward to the vacations and just this escape, like, well, when am I actually going to like live? And if this is what everyone says, this is what life is supposed to be like, I don't want anything to do with this. And I never wanted to like commit suicide or anything like that. It was just like the life I've been sold, I'm not buying it anymore. Like, whatever,
Mm-hmm.
whoever said this is the deal, like, I don't want any part of it. And I couldn't figure out why that was the case.
Yeah.
And I also had lots of guilt and shame around feeling the way I felt, because I should be grateful that I had a husband who was so helpful and was a 50-50, or maybe it's probably sometimes more than not. He's probably 75 and I'm 25 around the household, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or I should be grateful that like I work remotely and I make the money I make and I have the money that we have and we get to travel. Like, all of this peppered and layered with gratefulness. So then it was like, well, I can't tell anybody this, because then what, like then I'm this ungrateful bitch that's like telling how I feel, and everyone else is like, trying to get through the day. So I'll just keep quiet.
Yeah. It's kind of like the fish that's in water.
Mm-hmm.
Like, the fish doesn't realize that it lives in water,
Yeah.
you know? It's
Yeah.
not looking around going, I live in water. But
Yeah.
that is the way that it survives. Take it out of water and it's like, what is this? Right? So with stress, um, our human bodies, we are designed by evolution. We're currently still in a state where we have um, the fight in us, like to protect, to survive, to um, defend what we believe is ours, um, to block out those that we believe want to hurt us. And then from fight, we move into flee. Like, we want to run, we want to get away, we want to push away, we want to create a wall to keep those out, and to keep ourselves in sometimes. And then from there, we go to freeze. Freeze is when we're literally just shutting down to anesthetize ourselves so that we don't have to feel the pain of our lives. So this is where I spent a good deal of my time, in freeze. And also, one of the adaptations is fawn, and fawn is the people pleasing. Fawn is you being the peacemaker, trying to extract love and like the absence of silence from your mom, and to try and make peace with your dad, who was fired up and hot. And
It,
then
it
go
was,
ahead.
it was, me doing the dishes. It was me cleaning the house. It was me doing everything I could to please my mom so she would feel less stress. I did all this obviously unconsciously, probably, right? But like
Hmm.
trying to do all of these things so that if I could do these, then my thought or belief, unconsciously, of course, was then they wouldn't fight. Then they would, be happy when they came home. Then we could all get along and it wouldn't be these hot, angry discussions and or silence for days.
Hmm. Yeah. So just noticing how many of you have had that experience where you piled a whole bunch of stuff on your plate, whether that's work, um, whether it's like, we've used coping mechanisms: smoking, drinking, sex, watching TV, playing games, shopping,
Working.
working, right? all of these adaptations where it just seems like a normal thing that we're doing. Spending time on social media, watching the news. Like we gotta stay up on what's happening. We have to find out what's going on with so and so on social media. These are all these addictions that keep us in this space, oftentimes, of how we've adapted to cope with whatever stresses are going on in our lives. So I want to talk a little bit about the vibration scale. How do we raise our vibration, and what is it even? Why do we want to do that? And what does it mean? So, Erin, for you, what did you learn about the vibration scale? When did you hear about it, and how has this shown up for you?
Probably maybe 2 years ago. I think I did in the beginning. I was, I've talked about this, but finance is my background. I have considered myself a very rational, logical, is it right brain person, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right brain person. So all of that, like air quotes, airy fairy, like vibration and energy and all of that, that's like, yeah, right? Like that's kind of where I was in the beginning.
I think it's left brain is.
I might be opposite for the right side. I know left brain is for the right side. So, hey, I might be off, but whatever the brain side of the brain is that is completely analytical, logical, like it's got it. 1 + 1 got it. We got to figure out how, we know it's 2, but we got to prove that it gets to 2. Right. So I wasn't ready in the beginning to like know about energy and vibration. I knew about my emotions, but I didn't like how are you supposed to do that? Right. I just knew I was very aware of my thoughts. I knew that I learned, that my thoughts then are now creating my reality, but I stayed probably for a year and a half up in my head. Mm-hmm. So I didn't really get the whole vibration thing until I would probably say 6 months, a year in of getting coaching, like really working on taking it into the body, because that's very scary for someone who has lived in their head. If emotions for me, like I've already talked about my childhood, it's very intense, right? We don't want to go there. That is very, very scary to, I think, all of humanity, right? Like those are big hitter emotions, especially the lower vibration ones. So I don't know exactly when it was, but the more that I got into my body, the more that I allowed myself to get out of my head, I call it get out of my head and into my heart, into my body, the more I started just exploring around vibration. And oddly enough, though, like I've always known that our health and our wellness is because of how we feel inside. But I didn't actually know like healing occurs at 500 hertz, right? Like I didn't know those exact things. So it's just been a progression, I guess, and just a learning and a fascination with it. And I think as obviously as I took the year off, that's when I really started diving deep into like, okay, now we're getting into the mix, because like you said, Tanya, I took away all my addictions. I took away working. I took away saving. I took away and started using my money, right? So it's like I took it all away, and then I also like amplified it by using, which that for me is like the scariest thing. Like some people are like afraid of swimming sharks, and some people are afraid of like all the things. And I'm like, running out of money has been like death to me, right? So that's really when I started. I think on my year off, I read David Hawkins. I think is it Letting Go? Is that one, the one that he?
Yes. Yep. Letting Go, okay. The Pathway to Surrender. Surrender.
Okay. So when I read that, then he actually spells out the actual frequency of your vibration, right?
Yep.
And that's when I started paying attention. And I was like, okay, I get this now. And I had to see that I was living in vibrations of like 20 hertz, which is, I think, shame. I
Mm-hmm.
was living in anger. Anger's like 100 or something.
Anger's 150.
Okay. Anger's 150. So
Fear,
fear for sure. What's fear at?
100.
Okay.
100.
So if we're all my mathematicians, we take 20 and 100 and 150, right? And divide by 3, like my
Baseline.
primary baseline, of the 3, I'm not going to do the math in my head, but you know what I mean? Like I'm probably at like 100, right? Like that's where I'm hanging out in. And realizing like, wow, like I had to actually write down like, what are my primary emotions on a daily basis? Like, yes, I could like get to joy, like when Grayson and I would do something, right? But like on the daily, probably 15 hours out of the day, what am I feeling? It was those 3 emotions.
Yeah. So essentially, you stripped away all of the things that the coping mechanisms that you had set up for yourself. And, it actually reminds me of a conversation David and I had. So my husband, David, we were watching the show Alone. And in that show, people basically go out by themselves in the woods, in extreme
Yes.
conditions, right? And they have to, like, they only get to take a couple of resources with them, like a knife or bow and arrow kind of thing, and they have to survive. And a lot of the people, of course, that go on the show are survivalists. They're people um, that have spent a lot of time in their life learning like how to eat off the land, what's poisonous, what's okay, how to use the resources available of the land to create shelter, to create to make food. They have to hunt to, find their food or forage for berries or leaves or whatever. um, and it's always interesting when they're at the beginning of the show and they're busy trying to create their shelter and they're busy trying to sort of establish their camp.
I'm like, I know where Tanya's going. They're like probably in high vibration, right? It's like all the things. Are they
they're
like
doing.
Yeah.
So they're
Yeah.
so busy
Yep.
hitting all of those, ticking off all of those boxes. I need to create shelter. I need to find food. I need to create myself a safe space. And then, so sometimes people will tap out in that early stages, whether they're struggling with creating their shelter or getting food, right? It depends on what resources they come with. How much weight do they have on their bodies? Do they get injured? Like lots of things. But then the thing that usually, once they've got their shelter built and they figured out their fire or something like that, and there's nothing going on, nothing left to do. Some of them will find busy projects, but it's that being alone with their thoughts, missing their family, thinking about what's really important in my life. They're all there for this $500,000 prize, to be the last one standing of all the contestants that go out. There's, I believe, 10, is to win it. And so many people are like, the money's not worth this. Like, they get to that point where being alone with their thoughts,
It's too much.
Nothing else to do, right? That's where Aaron
But really what they're saying and what we haven't said yet, it's not being alone with their thoughts. It's that their thoughts create a vibration in their body. And they are not used to handling that vibration in their body.
Yep, being aware of it, being present with it, because there's nothing to distract them.
Yep.
There's no distraction there.
Because I think this is really important to point out, because someone could say to me, or I could even say, someone said I was stupid, and that has no vibration in my body, like, because I don't believe that it's true, right?
Mm-hmm.
But if you believe that I'm stupid is true, it's going to create a lower vibration in your body. It might create shame, or it might, it might create anger, whatever that feeling you feel when you say that. It has this electromagnetic charge, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so it's not, I think this is for my mindset people that want to stay up in their heads and not in their bodies. We can do all of the mindset work we want to work through and try to get to where we want. That, I think that was like the aha for me. I'm like, I'm doing all of the mindset work.
Mm-hmm.
Why in the fuck is it not changing?
Yep.
Because I hadn't gotten into my body and actually slowed down and been like, okay, what does this actually feel like in my body?
Mm-hmm.
And that takes patience. That for sure takes
Courage.
presence.
Yep.
Okay. For sure it takes courage. It takes allowing. You and I talk about this a lot. It's, I think a lot of us are so afraid because of our conditioning and what we have been running from all of our lives. We don't want to feel that. And you and I have talked, and I'll continue to say this till the end of time. Like, the goal is never to get rid of, air quotes, any emotion. It is to become like the ocean, right? It is to
Mm-hmm.
become this allowing of in and out, right? Do Tanya and I feel shame all the time?
Mm-hmm.
Does it last like it used to? No, not at all.
Do we get
So it's,
stuck there? No.
no, I don't think so. Like we used to, right? Like, it's like, here we are again. Hi,
Yeah.
Shane, come along, have some iced tea with me.
Yep.
But I think,
my old friend.
yeah. So I think that it's for people, it's like, oh no, I know my thoughts. Yeah. But where do they feel in your body when you say some of those thoughts to you? That's what we're really trying to get you to, or invite you to, play with and understand of, like, when you say, I should be a better mom, I shouldn't
Mm-hmm.
have forgotten that for my kid. Where do you feel that in your body? So it's really connecting those thoughts that want to stay in your head to the vibration in your body. Go ahead.
Yeah. So Dr. Joe talks about this, Dr. Joe Dispenza. Thoughts are the language of our minds. Our minds are like the narrative, the storyteller, the town crier. And so our minds are just like the news reporter, just reporting the news. So our thoughts are the language of our mind, and our feelings are the language of the body. And they work in tandem together. So if you're at a level of awareness and presence, like I notice, and I'm sure you do too, Erin, I won't speak for you. I notice when I listen to people talk now, they will tell you how they're feeling. They will tell
Yeah.
you, and sometimes it's like them pointing the finger at someone else going, this person is making me feel this way, or this person is doing this thing that I don't like. And it's in those thoughts that tell us what's going on with the emotions or feelings within our bodies.
Mm-hmm.
And how I say that they work in tandem is your body, it's like caffeine. So I'm drinking a Starbucks right now, people. And for some of us, like the addiction to, say, caffeine. Now, I'm not addicted. Anyway, we have basically receptors on every one of our cells that gets used to taking in a certain thing, whether it's caffeine, whether it's alcohol, whether it's a drug, whether it's fear, whether it's shame. We have this neurological wiring in our body, and not just in our brains. We have it in our guts. We actually have more neurons in our gastrointestinal system than we actually do in our brain.
Yep.
So this wiring is used to carrying a frequency to all of our cells. And if you've been running on, if you've got a vehicle that was designed and you've been running on unleaded and you decide to give it like diesel, you're going to have a problem, right? The system needs to be changed to accept diesel. That's one example. Another example could be that, our cells are wired to receive, like if all the time we've been living on sugar, people that work out know are you running in a ketosis state or are you running in a sugar burning state? Both are possible. You can also be flexible in sometimes running in ketosis, sometimes running on sugar. It's like what our bodies are used to. Our emotions are that fuel. Our emotions will say, just like if you're trying to get off sugar, you're on a diet, you're trying to get off sugar, you know that feeling that will come up because the body's like, hey, you've been giving me
it's the biochemical response, right?
Yeah.
It's like, hey, you haven't felt this in a while. I'm so used to having this sugar, AKA I'm so used to feeling shame. You haven't felt it in a while. Let me serve you up a bowl of shame.
Yep. So I'm going to make the thoughts that come up in your mind equal to that you've been used to running on.
Feeling for 50 years.
Yep. Yep. So, law of attraction is an actual law, like attracts like, and it makes no exceptions. So one of the hardest things about, one of the more challenging things about transformation is being willing to go through the detox that raising our vibration will present. And it's a step-by-step kind of process, right? We don't get to jump from living a baseline of shame, fear, or anger to feeling states of joy all the time. Right?
I think that's a huge step that I think people in the self-development world, for lack of a better word, leave out. I think you get into this work and you're like, okay, I know I don't want to feel this anymore. And I know I want to feel this. So I'm going to start feeling that. But until you, and I talk about the layer of an onion, until you peel back this layer of the onion, AKA yourself and your emotions that you are addicted to feeling on a daily basis for the last however many years you've been on this earth, you cannot just feel all happy-go-lucky. That's like putting a Band-Aid on a fucking femoral artery gaping wound. It's not going to work, right? And I think that's what a lot of us do. I think we're like, okay, I'm feeling good. Why is nothing changing? Because you're still really baseline your feeling. You haven't changed the those emotions on a consistent basis. And you also, like, at the cellular level, Dr. Joe talks about this, and I can put this again, in the show notes, but you have to go through at a cellular level of upgrading. He calls it like a biological upgrade. I think that's what he calls it, biochemical or biological upgrade. And so your cells vibrate. If they're vibrating at fear at 100, you actually have to change the molecular structure, the cellular structure of your cells, cells. So,
yeah. So sometimes that can show up in a variety of ways. And, at the beginning of this podcast, I was saying, we want our insides to, like, we're also focused on what's going on outside of us. Who's doing what to us, who's making us feel a certain way, believing that they need to change who they are, how they are, feeling like we are victims. Feeling a victim, being a victim is a vibration. It is a practiced vibration. I know, because I was really fucking good at it.
Tanya gets A++ in that.
Score. Yeah. So it's a practice of changing little by little from the inside to allow that to come out.
I want to say
Yeah.
something else, and I know I'm interrupting my Manny Jen, but
It's okay.
sorry. Also something to think about, and this is, for those of you listening, something that we unpack with Wellness from Within and like through our group coaching and individual private clients, and we can talk even more, this is probably a podcast that we do over and over because of the awareness. But the thing I want to mention is that when we are going through these detoxes, if we try to, and I've talked about this and I use like airplanes as an example, if you're used to feeling shame, it's almost like your nervous system cannot handle you bumping up to joy. That it's too big of a jump, and your nervous system, for lack of a better word, shuts down. Like it's too much, right? And so the idea isn't to be like, oh my gosh, you recognize, oh yeah, I'm in anger all the time, I want to feel joy. No, look at, if you're open to it, Tanya, like what's the next vibration after fear is anger, right? So you want to go from, and not necessarily in this linear step, but recognizing you're going to go from fear to then at some point, maybe it's like courage, right? And you get more neutral, for lack of a better word. You go from negative feeling, air quotes, negative emotion, to just feeling neutral. Because sometimes just hopping all the way over to like, oh, everything's fabulous, it's just too much. And it's not a real thing you can feel in your body because it's too big of a jump.
Yeah. And the capacity, so our stress response is always going to kick in. It's going to kick in outside of our conscious awareness. So if we're trying to move ourselves, like one of the things I used to say, and I don't kick my own ass for it anymore, but I recognize that, like, I used to just be like, oh, well, think positive. Here's some affirmations. Just think positive. Why can't you think positive? But the thing that happens is our stress response, that desire to fight, to flee, to freeze, to fawn, is in our, it's called our subconscious. It's actually in our body. It's the thing that is the automatic pilot of our bodies. And so to change that, we have to go a little bit at a time. We have to practice repetitive daily. We have to make a choice for ourselves every single day and practice that. Practice being different. And most of the time, we completely fuck it up the first time, and the second time, and the third time. And the awareness doesn't come until afterwards. Like, think about the fact that most of you that are ambulatory, that can walk, when you wake up in the morning, you don't have to remind yourself, okay, now how is it that I walk? Which muscles do I use? How do I employ? I mean, some of us wake up in the morning, we're like, oh, walking's not good today. Or some of us feel like we just want to jump out of bed and we're ready to go. But we don't have to reteach ourselves every day. That's because that awareness, that skill, that way of walking is programmed in the body. So we talk about conditioning. Conditioning is, if you grow up, it's like the classic story of, I don't know if that's classic, but like the story of a child raised by wolves. The child's going to act like a wolf. Our programming, our conditioning comes from our parents, it comes from our grandparents, it comes from our ancestry, it comes from our culture, it comes from our religion, that basically is how we do us. That's already in the body. So when we are in a state of stress, when we're trying to cope with something, we're going to immediately go to that system of programs, that conditioning that drives our behaviors, that drives our beliefs.
It's like the lowest common denominator for my mathematicians, right? It's like,
yes,
we're going to go down to the lowest common denominator. And if fear or anger and, or, all of those are your most practice, that's what you're going to go to.
Yep. And so the practice of raising your vibration can be something as simple as meditating for 5 or 10 minutes. And then I know we've got all of our defined heads and ajnas if you're following human design, or are people that just are like, I have a monkey mind. I couldn't do that. I couldn't sit still for 5 minutes. Having different practices that you can do. Sometimes it might be movement. Sometimes it might be music. Sometimes it might be breath work.
I want to say this though, because Erin was queen of monkey minds. So my friends out here that are like, oh, I can't sit still for 5 minutes, my monkey mind, that is one of the ways your body is addicted to being, right? So it's actually sitting down for 5 minutes. I'm not saying an hour at the beginning, right? Here we go back to nervous system. That's just like too much, but it's sitting down for 5 minutes. And it doesn't have to be in a quiet room and all the things, but it's just like, okay, I'm going to sit on the couch. I'm not going to look at my phone. And I'm just going to listen to all of the thoughts that my brain tells me. And so it always goes back to, are we willing to try things, because I've made some comments to my mom and she's like, oh, I can't do that. It's like, every single human on this planet is capable of all of the things, having everything they want. That is never the question. The question is, are you willing to feel the discomfort while you are working towards becoming a new person? That is the question. Yes. And sometimes that answer is no, and that's okay. But realizing we always have a choice and we're in the driver's seat saying no, not because of something our bodies are doing, something that our mind's doing, something else is happening to us. It's us making that choice.
Yeah. And it's no joke. It's no joke making that choice. I make it every day. I get up and I'm like, okay, what do I got going for me today? How's today going to go? What's possible for today? But it's a daily practice, right? But then before I was unconsciously practicing being who I was and just like doing the same thing over and over again and then expecting something to change. Why aren't things changing? Because I was just getting up and being the same person every day, telling myself the same stories, having the same thoughts, the same feelings, the same emotions, and the same practice for coping with those things.
One of our girlfriends, she asked me one time when she was interviewing me, and I want to say 2 things. One, let me tell you, we all have our addictions, right? And sometimes we have multiple addictions and they are no joke. Like I have always been very upfront. Like I've never done drugs. Alcohol, probably after I got divorced, was probably my most addictive behavior. And I don't know what it's like to do drugs, but I can only imagine because of the way I felt after I stopped working and all of those feelings were coming up. They were so intense. And, Tanya will vouch for like, my goodness, like we've had plenty of days and weeks and months of, and not all like concurrently, right? But like, it's no joke. The addictions are no joke. And what our friend asked me, she was like, why would you want to do that? And my answer was because we are either unconsciously uncomfortable, like what you just said, we're repeating the same patterns over and over again and thinking and wanting our life to be different, or we're willing to feel such discomfort that once we work through that discomfort on the other side, we get to have what we want. We get to have the life that we want. And if I'm gonna feel like shit, I might as well, I made the kind of pact with myself, like if no matter which way, right, you're gonna feel it. you get to decide how you want to feel it. You want to feel it and you want to have what you want, or you want to feel it and then feel it and serve up the same old platter, right?
Yep.
We get to decide. And so I had to choose that what I wanted was more valuable to me. I was willing to feel the discomfort than to stay where I was and feel how I felt.
Yep.
And so I think for Erin, it's important to our listeners that we don't think like, oh, the addictions, it's just like, it's no joke. It's tough stuff. And we're all capable of doing it. And I think that is why people kind of continue to go back, right? Because sometimes those addictions get so intense, I guess, is that a good word to use, that it's almost like, what do they talk about? Like during the gold rush, like they stop just short of like finding the gold, and it's almost like in a way that those addictions are like that. It's like, I just can't take it. I have to turn back. It's just too much. And you're like right there. It's like when those addictions get so intense, now I know, like, okay, breakthrough is about to happen. It's like, can we keep going? Right. Yeah, that gave me full body chills. It's like, whew, man, like I wish someone would have like actually said those things, like, and you're never going to experience them in your body that them on an intellectual level, like, right? Like everyone has to walk this walk. But I think sometimes this in between, which I've been so passionate about sharing, is sometimes left out. And I think that for me, I mean, I'm so grateful that I had you during our year off, but I think that it's hard enough to do it with someone who's experiencing it at the same time. I can't imagine doing it. I mean, I would, right? Because I was willing, but like, it's so much, it's a lot more fun, or you get to the point of like, okay, when you're doing it with someone else or in a group of people that are, experiencing what you're experiencing, it is, for lack of a better word, I think comforting, right? Like, and not a comforting like, oh, I'm in this misery. Oh, what misery are you in? No, it's just more so like, I see you, I support you, I'm right here for you. I know it's tough stuff, right?
Yeah.
So,
yep. Been there, done that, got the t-shirt. Yeah. Yep. That was enlightening.
So I think, if you're open to it, if you're interested in some light reading, like, I think that I really liked, the Dr. Hawkins book. Like that was an eye-opening thing to kind of introduce me to the vibrations and how that actually works in our body.
How the emotions come up, because vibrations is basically synonymous with emotion, right? Energy in motion. It's the frequency, the wave that goes through. So yeah. And
so I hope this was, go ahead.
I was just going to say, in the amount of resistance that those waves produce.
This girl, Erin, she's that resistance muscle was strong.
And mine was just like dead. I was resistant to all the things and resistant to nothing. I just was like, I had no more capacity to fight. Yeah.
So I hope this was helpful for everybody. And if you've got questions or you want, like, hey, elaborate on this, let us know.
Yep. And you can also go to www.university, university.com to find us and to get on our newsletter if you would like. We're going to be starting Wellness from Within probably in January in a live round, so that you'll have Erin and I there to walk you through the process if you would like to join us.
And we're a lot of fun. I mean, come on.
We are.
Yeah.
All right.
So until next time.
Until next time.
Thanks, everybody. Okay.
Bye.
Bye.